to start, say one is it's a real privilege to be here with this incredible group. One of the best parts of the work we get to do in the world of youth sports is the people that you get to meet. And there's so much going on in youth sports and so much changing. The ability to pick up the phone and learn from people that are real experts and that care a lot about the industry is a real privilege that I certainly have, and I think the people that will be joining us today are among those group of people that I lean in and look to, and I know are doing great things for youth sports. For those that don't know you, don't know me, my name is Jeremy Goldberg. I'm the president and quarterback at LeagueApps, um, and it's my pleasure to be the kind of Sherpa for today's conversation as we cover a really important conversation around navigating risk in youth sports. And there's a lot of things that I could do to provide context here as the president and co-founder of LeagueApps, and our opportunity to work with thousands of organizations and millions of families, and the work we also do for a Fun Play Foundation that I'm really proud of. But I want to start as through the lens of a parent today. I had the opportunity to coach flag football yesterday. I have an 8 and 10-year-old. And one thing that was really struck me as my daughter started playing middle school sports is how protected she was when she was at school. I had to fill out all these forms. Everyone was background checked. They couldn't take the field until the medical forms had been filled and reviewed. And there was a real sense of safety related to that. And then I realized that my daughter was playing on that same court with some of the same coaches and the referees in the context of youth sports with none of those protections at all. And it started to get me thinking and started to think about, like, as we think about our kids, we think about youth sports. What are the opportunities to make it safe? What is happening? And as we start to have more and more conversations, I realize this is a conversation that's happening more and more across the country. It's a question from a parent perspective. It's a question governing bodies are having. It's a question that members of Congress are asking themselves, organizations are asking themselves. And we really wanted to surface those things because I think this may be one of the most important conversations that could be happening right now in youth sports. And in many cases, it's not the most exciting topic. People want to talk about AI, and I don't mean Allen Iverson. I mean artificial intelligence, right? People might want to talk about, how to grow their organization. They want to talk about sponsorship. They may want to talk about, how to think about expanding in different ways. They want to talk about what happens on the field. But at the end of the day, the risks and the obligations you have as an organization are absolutely critical. And if you don't get that right, it will prevent you doing any of those things and having any of the impact. And if you do it right, it actually is the thing that can unlock that. And so with that, I'm excited to welcome this incredible group of people today. We're going to start off with a conversation with Tyree Burks from Players Health, Ken McGinley from Vertical Insure, and Seth Lieberman from Anchored. And then we're going to pull in Jennifer Peacock, who I've met in many different kind of roles, but has been in the shoes of the people running organizations and now has incredible expertise as well to bring in the conversation as well. So I want to start, and I'm going to put Ty, you on the spot first. Just introduce yourself. Who are you? And more importantly, when we talk about youth sports and we talk about this conversation of safety and risk, what's the lens that you're bringing as we get today's conversation started?
Absolutely. No. So honored to be here. Thank you, Jamie. It's been just cool to be a part of this and to work with folks that are taking this seriously. As you shared, this may not be the most sexiest topic or the most popular topic to talk about in this space, but definitely the most impactful. I started Players Health 11 years ago. I come at this from the lens of an athlete. Uh, and my life is actually the result of what happens when kids come into a positive environment, a safe environment. I grew up in the south side of Chicago in the projects, and sports was a safe place for me growing up. And so that has been my desire. I think when I decided to hang it up, I played a little bit of professional ball, and I wanted to figure out how do we go about creating safe spaces for athletes to play sports. We started tracking injuries on athletes and all of these other things. But when we think about what we do here at Players Health, insurance is one of the largest expense that any organization has to manage any day. I mean, whether it's a court, field, or ice, insurance is required. And I think our approach here at Players Health is that the way that we go about creating safe environments is to give organizations visibility of the risk that they have. We give them tools and resources to manage that risk. And lastly, we give them insurance to transfer it. And I think when we think about how we go about doing that, the safer the organization is, the less they pay in insurance, the less claims we have, the more money we make. So I believe it's a win-win, opportunity that we have with organizations when they take this stuff seriously, and definitely something that we want to be on mission for in terms of how we, offer the services that we do.
Thanks. I appreciate all that you're doing and the leadership you're providing in the industry. Seth, introduce yourself and how you come at this in the context that you bring from Anchor.
Yeah, thanks. I was not a former pro athlete, not even for a cup of coffee. not for lack of trying, lack of genetics and skill. But I'm the CEO here at Anchored. I've got 4 kids, teens, all in myriad youth sports. And we really, this is a great conversation. We actually think it's the most important conversation because we think fundamentally that all the good things you mentioned, Jeremy, they start with a safe environment. I know I speak for Ken and Jennifer and Ty and everybody when I say that. Like, if it's not safe, the good stuff can't happen. It has to be physically safe, emotionally safe, safe from abuse. Like, that's the cornerstone from which you as a company grow, kids grow, you're profitable, like all these things that maybe, your top of your head, it all comes from a root of safety. And so we're mission driven as an organization to protect kids and keep them safe, and then help organizations mitigate and manage their risk around youth sports. Right. And so we're partnered with everybody on this call, which is awesome because we stay in our lane, which is, hey, when the rubber meets the road or the cleats meet the turf, as we say, like, how do you know that every coach is checked and trained to look for abuse and knows what heat acclimatization stroke looks like, or what good coaching looks like, what's our code of conduct? So we help everybody make sure that everybody who's on that field or rink or whatever has done all the stuff they have to do. And when you do that, not only is the kid safer when there's an issue, not if. Unfortunately, it's a when world, and you call Ty and you say, I got this problem. And he says, did you do all these things? And they're like, yeah. It's like, okay, you're good. Like, it's not a good situation, but we've mitigated and managed the best we can. And so that's what our goal is really to do, is make sure that everybody has a really simple way to keep kids safe.
Love that, Seth. And last but not least, Ken, I know representing Vertical Insure as well as Jennifer. Talk to us a little bit how you're coming at this conversation and the context of Vertical Insure as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I have the privilege of running the customer functions at Vertical Insure, and I bring really 20 years of experience in youth sports tech, and not just in the companies, but also, with the help of my wife, shepherding 3 kids through their sports lives, and we all survived. And it wasn't just as a parent. I had the opportunity to be coach, team manager, event operator, board member. So it has given me a tremendous advantage in running and having a role of supporting customer experiences really at all different levels, and bringing that to Vertical Insure. I was part of introducing the embedded insurance, the checkout insurance that we see and now expect as we're going through. And Vertical Insure, we have the privilege of partnering with platforms like LeagueApps to make that available. And it's like trip insurance. It's expensive. You're making an investment, and that is risky. And we, as parents, we know things happen. Injuries by far the most, but there are other situations that add risk to that. And we know that there was a desire to, just like the unknown of booking a trip. Well, the same thing. Can I protect that, multiple $1,000 potentially registration? And not only is it helping the families and the parents, but it's also helping the organizations, because those can be difficult conversations if they have to have refund conversations in no refund situations where expenses are already paid. So we feel really privileged to be able to contribute not only into the risk adversement and helping parents and families, but also really helping organizations protect their revenue. So again, these are real things that sometimes organizations don't think about until they sit down and run the math on where those and the time that's being spent. So really honored to be part of that and be part of this group to try to help guide some of the questions that people might have regarding any type of risk or any type of protection that might be needed.
I appreciate that and excited for everyone to be here. And as we step into this conversation, um, you often hear this as a panel. We're just going to talk about insurance. Like, we're going to talk about it in a very specific level. And I think what people are missing is the larger context of the conversation. And as we jump into this conversation, I'll ask a lot of the questions. We got some questions in advance. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A tool as well, that we'll be monitoring as well with the team. But at the heart of this is this broader notion that youth sports is changing a lot, right? So if you're on this call and you're like, hey, youth sports hasn't changed in the past 20 years. There's nothing that's different. Everything is straightforward. Then you might be, I just want to know where you live and what that world is, because I don't think that's the experience that I'm seeing everywhere else, right? And whether it's like And what I actually think is interesting is a lot of these things that are going on that you could observe seem to have its roots or connections back into questions on safety and compliance at risk. So you may be an organization saying, wow, there's so much investment capital coming in and all this private equity money. Like, what's going on? Well, some of that's connected to risk and safety because those organizations know how buttoned up they have to be, or people that are trying to raise capital, which is shifting an expectation, right? You might be sitting here saying, I can't pay my coaches enough, right? There's a lot of challenges around that stuff. Well, maybe it's because you're losing revenue a lot or your insurance premiums are going up. And that's impacting actually your ability to attract coaches who want to put themselves in that position or your ability to actually be able to, because of how you're navigating risk, invest in the things you want to miss. So there's a lot of things that are connected. And so I want to start here by understanding what's changing. Like what is happening in the backdrop of youth sports that people might not be appreciating, right? That they might see it in their own world, but they're not missing the larger pattern of what is happening in youth sports and how that is impacting issues of safety, compliance, and risk. So maybe I'll start with you, Ty. Like, what's going on? Is there something different now? What explains this? Is there data or evidence to suggest that there's a crisis or a challenge that people may not be full and seeing yet?
Yeah, there's a ton that's happening. I think, and I'll talk a bit about our thesis of why we pivoted into insurance. I think when we first set out in insurance, we started as a risk management company first. I tell my board we're going to step into insurance, and they're like, Ty, you don't know anything about insurance. Help us better understand this. Well, I actually sat on a youth association board for a number of years. And for that time, in the couple of years that where I saw this happen, I was actually managing our risk management in charge of our insurance premiums and making sure that we have proper insurance for our organizations. Our insurance premiums double from one year to the next. Now, my question, we implement background checks, abuse awareness training, like all the things that organizations need to do. Why are we paying more when we've made our organizations safer? Well, what has happened over easily the past 10 years, there's been a contraction of the amount of carriers that actually want to write youth and amateur sports. We've gone from, a couple dozen carriers that want to write insurance. And then the insurance we're talking about is the commercial insurance. It's general liability insurance. It's the accident insurance. These are the insurance that if an organization gets sued for something, the insurance policy is paying for that. The number of carriers, they're running away from the hill, they're not running to the hill. And so what we've seen is there's now only a handful of those carriers that are now writing youth and amateur sports for general liability. And when you have a contraction of the market like that, a couple things happen. One, cost shoots up because there's no competition. And limits dramatically are reduced. And that's what we've seen. 10 years ago, a youth organization used to be able to get $5 and $10 million towers of sexual abuse coverage. Now, you'd be lucky if you can get $1 million. 10 years ago, I used to be able to get that same coverage for a couple of dollars an athlete. That cost has now doubled in the past 10 years, easily. And all of that is because of increase in claims. Unfortunately, we've seen a large number of incidents that everyone knows about, like gymnastics and the Penn States and the Boy Scouts. This is a pooled risk. So because there's not a ton of carriers, when the claims do happen, we all feel it. And we have to course correct. So of course, this is loss-based. So if there's a large number of losses that are happening, the premiums have to be impacted, and we're starting to see an increase to pay for those losses. And so I think over the course, one, risk is accelerating. Organizations now have more liability that they now have to manage. Claims are increasing, the number of carriers are decreasing, and cost is going up. All of that cost is now being transferred to the parent, and it's all baked into the registration. And so this is the big shift that I think we saw. When I first shifted in insurance about 6-7 years ago, we started to see this happen in a really big way. And our goal at Players Health is to bring more capacity back into the space, because when you have more competition, you now have more cost, there's more cost savings because now you can spread the risk out. Right now, there's only a few carriers holding a lot of the risk that happens in youth sports, and risk management is the only thing that can solve it, really.
Yeah, and that what you're describing is that if it's been doubling up till now, like this can continue to happen, continue to be challenging for organization. And one of the dynamics there is how do you navigate this as an individual organization? At the same time, like the behavior of everybody impacts everybody in the context of risk and how the industry is being viewed. Seth, what's your lens on this? Like, how do you think about what you're seeing is happening? You have perspective outside the industry, now in the industry. I think it starts to demystify a little bit the context here as we think about what's creating risk.
Yeah, I think Ty's exactly right, and it's also related to a couple things that we see as a super macro. Like number one, it's about money, right? Like there's an incredible amount of money flowing into youth sports. 40 billion in North America, 50 billion, 60 billion. I put the number where you want, it's irrelevant. And what happens is the more money, the more bad actors and lawsuits and issues follow, right? And so, and that's sort of not uncommon in all things in the world, right? And so the growth of youth sports is naturally, it is broadly good, but also sometimes narrowly bad, right? Because it's bringing more issues. I think the other thing, there's two other things that are sort of macro trends that have happened that are, again, broadly good but problematic, right? So number one is people are more willing, this is the broadly good thing, to actually report claims and issues. So Safe Sport told me, Benita Fitzgerald Mosley, CEO of Safe Sport, I know most people on the call know her, she told me the other day that year over year, Q1 26 through Q1 25, their number of reported issues is up like 25 or 30%. And it's not, they think, because there's more abuse, is because more people are now comfortable saying, hey, this wasn't okay, or this happened, or whatever. That, of course, is going to drive up premiums. Those are issues that have to be resolved. Not all of them are probably guilty, of course, but like, so what's happening is the industry's growing. More people are willing to step up and comment about stuff. And then the last piece is that there isn't good regulation, right? So there's no strong federal regulation. I don't believe it's coming anytime soon. And so while there's some federal laws, every state enacts their own law. I live in Massachusetts. We have laws. Pennsylvania, where Jeremy has their own laws. California, Florida, Ohio, the list goes on. 37 states do their own things because there isn't, in the absence of strong federal regulation, states are trying to solve stuff locally. Hey, this is what we think we should do in Massachusetts to keep kids safe or whatever. All well-intentioned, some of it good, some of it bad, but that creates friction, that creates cost, that creates, challenges. And so ultimately, I think those are the things that are driving all of this. They're the corollary to the growth, and I believe they will get solved. I believe when we are successful as an organ, as a group, like not just people on the call, but people in the audience and everybody, as we do better at keeping kids safe, we will get more carriers into the space, right? There will be a larger pool. Premiums will flatten or come down, right? And those kinds of things. But it's a long road, right? The pendulum swings, and we have to keep pushing on it
Yeah.
against
Well,
the sort of macro issues to shape it.
and what I hope from this conversation, because look, you can go to any kind of, there are a lot of different places people might have panels or discussions on this. And I think what's so powerful about this conversation as we pull in Ken is if you understand the why behind what's going on, the first thing you'll realize is that some of this stuff is happening beyond the control of any one organization, but it's still
Correct.
affecting you as an organization. So the more understanding you have of what's driving it, one, you realize this ain't going away in the sense that these are trends that are only going to probably create a broader pronounced dynamic. And two, you have a more comprehensive way of viewing and stepping through how you solve it. And collectively, we as an industry have an opportunity to be the stewards and ways of addressing it as a collective action in addition to individual action. So I think that's why this context is so important. So Ken, as you hear this conversation, we've talked a lot about this macro force that there's money in youth sports, there's the contraction of the number of carriers, you've got societal dynamics that are changing things as well that related to reporting. You've got the question of government regulation and the patchwork and where there's an absence of it. What else are you saying that is creating the context, especially from the lens of vertical insure, that is the backdrop of what's changing in youth sports and why this is becoming a more and more pronounced issue related to kind of financial risk, organizational risk?
Yeah, for sure. Ty, you mentioned that it all flows into registration, and that is the number one form of income of revenue coming into organizations because all these protections, the safe sport. I mean, it all takes time and money to build that safety blanket around the organization that you need, and registration fuels that. And that from the lens of vertical insure, that's something that we're very proud of, is that we have the ability to impact and protect the registration revenues that are coming through, and because they are expensive, as I mentioned earlier, but to be able to, whether it's player registration or team registrations, that if organizations, as they're being run more like businesses, which rightfully so, they can keep better track, because it's not the days where you can necessarily just kind of run it. You want to be good stewards of the community. You want to be able to take care of families, get that, and that's an element that I hope always is in sports, that it's not cold. But you need to have policies in place and refund policies. Otherwise, you're going to lose control. And there is that risk of money that's bleeding out. And are people tracking that? Are we tracking that and understanding that that could really impact the operating ability of an organization? So to be able to know that organizations won't go live with their registrations without that protection, that parents can buy the coverage to protect their registrations so the organization can stand stronger behind their refund policies that they have, and to offer that as an option. The same thing with tournaments. I mean, weather hits and you could lose an entire season of potential revenue, because that might be your one revenue stream for that particular year. And to be able to offer that type of registration insurance for those teams, so
Yeah.
again, we play a part in that we can help protect the revenue that helps fuel all the other protections that an organization needs.
Ken, is it fair to say, like, when you think about like we have a situation where organizations are facing higher costs, it seems like there's a context in which people might be demanding or looking for more and more refunds, or how organizations are dynamic or navigating that. How what do you see in your data or your experience in terms of how this question of refunds are impacting organizations? Like, what percent are they dealing with? How impactful is that? Like, how can you crystallize that challenge? Because it seems the backdrop of this is maybe more people looking for those kinds of refunds.
Yeah, I think the way that a lot of organizations is the impact of again, one registration, what that might mean, because what does that one registration, and again, let's say it's $2,000. Well, that's a huge impact on that. Might be the coaching staff, might be equipment, might be the fields, the referees, all of that, and you add that up, and maybe take even just if it's 5% that may of the kids that may need to drop out for and they're not all for injury reasons. There are certainly people that want refunds for what we call non-covered reasons, that didn't like the team I was put on, or I just decided not to play, I'm going to go play a different sport. Well, those are difficult in any conversation, but those are probably going to be hard for an organization to be able to offer refunds in that. But they are the hardship ones, job transfers, illness, injury. No organization wants to turn away that family, and so giving them the ability to protect that. But we found that by offering the refund protection, we've been able to cut refund conversations, refund requests, and refund revenue being lost by over half. And that's been a
Wow.
huge impact for
So
organizations. And it's not just that; it's also chargeback situations. Not a lot of people. That's a four-letter word, is the chargebacks, because those are real as well. And having the protection offered allows for better defense in chargeback situations. So that's another
and
avenue to protect.
And maybe to make some like summarize all this, the context too. I think about like today, there's increasing economic uncertainty, right? There's different kind of dynamics that parents might be facing, even on the context of health insurance premiums also going up, right? And the concerns and issues of how people are maybe the deductible, whatever it may be. The question is, like, as parents are navigating that, that's one of the things that's also driving. They're investing a lot of money. There's a lot of insecurity connected.
Yeah.
There are a lot of reasons that might ultimately lead to asking for more refunds, or the fact that when their kids get injured, there's a question of what coverage they also have or what other supplemental help they need as well. So you have this backdrop, right? We've just talked about it, and on one hand, the idea here is, though, this sounds kind of scary. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have a lot of costs going up. You're under a lot of pressure as an organization. And I think one of the things we want to do is just acknowledge that, right? Like, let's see it for what it is. And I think the idea, and the people that are on this conversation, the other people that have written in who couldn't make it, they're asking for this. One, I want to just commend you because you're here trying to understand. And I think the more that we understand collectively, the more we can do something about it. And so we move the conversation forward to, like, we talked about this in a macro sense, but from an organizational perspective, and maybe we'll start with Utah again. Like, how is this actually impacting organizations today? When you have all this stuff swirling around, like, what are you seeing, um, the way that manifests itself and how it's really having a real world effect on what organizations are able to do, or what the risks are to those organizations if they aren't paying attention?
Yeah. I think at its simplest core, there are things, call it, there are the bare minimums that organizations need to do that they're not doing. Like we talked, Seth brought up a great example of just making sure that everyone is properly background checked and credentialed. That's the first question that we ask when a claim is actually filed. Like the very first question. Like, say there is a misconduct issue that a claim is being filed on. the first question is, was the coach credentialed? Have they gone through training? Because if that hasn't been done, then it's automatically negligence and it's going to be a limit loss. And if you have a max limit of 1 million, anytime those incidents happen, it's almost like, unfortunately, if you have a death claim, you're automatically going to see a limit loss. If there's a sexual abuse incident happening, it's automatically a limit loss. And especially if you don't
So just to
have
be
it,
clear, that's a million dollar loss.
it all depends on the coverage.
Right.
The lawyers are trained to go after the maximum limit of the liability coverage. And so if the first question that's going to be asked were the bare minimums being fulfilled, background check, abuse and merit training, if those weren't done, then it's negligence and it's a limit loss. Like that's just at its simplest form. I gave an example on Monday just around just credentialing coaches and making sure that they have the proper credentialing to just sit on the sideline. These are bare minimums that organizations should be having in place. And then you start getting into the cardiac arrest. In the state of New York and California, organizations have to have that in place. Guaranteed, if there is an athlete that that has a cardiac issue, and everyone hasn't been properly trained on this, and we don't have an AED within 3 minutes of being plane surfaces, what is required, it's automatically going to be a negligence. So these are just things that, one, the law now requires us to do it. That is where we start and how we manage all of these things. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are going, well, this is where I've ran my organization up until this point. Times have dramatically changed. And there's an assessment that we have all of our organizations go through. It's 15 questions. That assessment, it's free. It lets you know what policies you need to have. Take the assessment, get your score, and then make sure everyone is trained on the policies. But I think we got to have the bare minimum fulfilled from the very beginning.
Yeah. So, and Seth, as you hear this, and I think there's two sides of this, which is one, there's the idea of like the risk that organizations face when they don't do this well, and like Ty's starting to paint the picture. And then there's also the opposite case, which is there's also a general sense of the moral obligation we have to keep kids safe and do the right thing,
Right.
in addition to the risks. But in some cases, the reason why you have regulation or the reason you have is because sometimes that's not sufficient. But when you look at this, what are you seeing the impact that it's having on an organization if they do this well or if they don't do this well, and how do you think organizations are trying to navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fundamental thesis of Anchored is about protecting kids and keeping them safe. But we believe, and this is the company bet, that this is only going to get worse, not better, in terms of things you need to do and regulation. And by the way, the more we learned about concussions, the more we understood the need for concussion training. We didn't know before, or those that did know didn't share. And so, like, we will continue to learn new things, and that will continue to expand the universe, right, of the stuff. And so the more we know, the more we do. And what we see is that, so the thesis is organizations that lean in to safety and compliance early are going to grow faster and be bigger and more profitable. And those that don't may not even be in business in 5 or 10 years. And we actually already see the early signs of that. So we see a bunch of our customers, and I won't name names here, but those that are really doing this the right way and taking it seriously, which is, by the way, a continuous approach. It's not a one and done. Can't ever be that, right? Because things evolve and things change. They're actually growing faster, right? And why are they growing faster? I got 4 kids. Ty's got kids. I think everybody on this call has kids, at least on the panel here. I would never, not that I don't make any decisions. My wife makes them, but I'll say me. I would never put my kids in any program that wasn't safe. D1, scholarship, college, like, not worth it, right? Not worth it. And so that's the same decisions that parents make. Like, I want to put my kid where I know they're going to be safe and where the right things have been done. And those organizations not only grow faster, but they can command higher prices, right? They get better rates because they're like, hey, this is a first-class experience. And by the way, then they go to Ty and say, hey, I've done all this great stuff. What can you do on my premium? He's like, you're doing all this stuff? Let's figure it out. Maybe we can bring it down. So they're able to actually grow their margin, right? So we talk a lot about the scare and the risk and the fear, and it's not that that's not real. There is another side to that coin, that those that lean in are actually accelerating their own growth as organizations. And I think that's the lens we like to look at it through, right? Because we're not negative people, even though there's a lot of fear and negativity in the world we live in. Like, hey, wait a minute, you can do good and do well, right? You actually don't have to pick.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, and it's I think as we navigate, I had experience as a parent recently. I was supposed to take my kids to a rock climbing gym. I went to this place, and they're like, "Oh, sign this waiver and like watch this 30-second video, and you're going to be in charge of the safety of the kids." And I'm like, "This sounds like a bad idea." So I was like, "I'm going to go to the place down the block where they have someone who's a professional there that's doing it, as opposed to me watching a
Yeah.
30-second video to figure out how to do that." And so I think to your point
Right.
about what parents are going to gravitate to as there's more and more awareness, I think being able to meet those needs meets both a moral obligation, but also protects you from the downside as well. Ken,
Mm.
as you think about like, and you started to allude to this a little bit, when you think about the organizational implications, like what when if kids that get injured and the parent may not have insurance, or the revenue leakage, like what's the real world implication that you're saying if 50% of refunds can be reduced if you have the right insurance? When you don't have this, like what are you seeing that happens to organizations if they aren't navigating both the financial, legal liability, all these different risks well?
Yeah, well, there is the organizations that aren't offering this as an option. Again, it comes back to what are their policies? What is the statement that's out there? Because anytime a parent is going to register online, you want them to click through that registration as quickly as and efficiently as possible without any regrets or thoughts. And again, by you put down a couple $1,000, you're going to pause. And again, it's whether again going back to the kind of the example of trip insurance, not everybody is going to take those options. Some people, I'll self-insure, I'm fine. But to be able to offer that comfort level is important, because then again, for the organization, it gives them the ability to feel better and more confident about their refund policies that they do have. And so if that bad situation happens, the unforeseen injury, and that conversation needs to happen, the organization knows that, hey, you've got the insurance, great. We get to keep our revenue. We're going to be able to pay our refs and our coaches and everything, and you're going to be made whole as well through the insurance. The other is that if they are in a lot of these larger clubs with the higher registrations are going to be on payment plans. And so payment plans is another thing. What happens when that child or that athlete is injured halfway through and there's still another, $1,000 due on that? Well, with our policies, the organization itself is part of the policy. We call it loss payee. And so if that situation happens, the parent is made whole for their loss, but then the organization can get the check written directly for them for the remaining balance of that. That's a huge situation where normally they would have to maybe write that off. They would have to have a really uncomfortable conversation. Parent, sorry, I need you to keep paying that installment even though your kids are out. So again, it not only protects the revenue that's already been coming in, but it also gives you that chance to protect the revenue that's you're expecting and budgeting for going forward. So again, that's just
Yeah.
something that when organizations have that in place, whether it's a season or a couple years, it's like they can't do without it, because they know they need that and they want that because they've seen it, what happens without it.
Yeah,
Jeremy,
Seth, go ahead,
I want to
please.
just follow up one thing, which I think is a common thread that we hear a lot. Ty and I have certainly talked a lot about this, but I think we all view this world and safety as an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, which, in the sense of like, hey, having some insurance, like not only for like general liability, but having maybe my daughter broke her wrist playing futsal and they wouldn't refund it. It was in the 10th day of the season and we ate $800 on it. Now she happened to hate futsal, but we were also pretty pissed and she never played futsal again. Mm-hmm. And so she still plays soccer, right? She's a varsity soccer player, but she would never play futsal again. She might have played again if we'd had a better experience, but an ounce of prevention here about, hey, are we doing some stuff up front? Are we making sure we're doing the checks and the trainings? Do we have the right insurance? It seems like an expense and it seems like a pain in the butt, but it's actually the backside of that when things go wrong is so much greater, right? If you have a catastrophic claim and you don't have insurance, like way worse than paying the insurance premium.
I have to jump in really quick on that.
Yeah,
Seth,
yeah.
I was just
one thing
about to
you
pull you
just
in, but wait,
said,
you don't jump in
well,
yet because I got to
the
introduce
one
you.
thing you just said is you said your daughter had a bad experience tied directly to not getting that refund. And that is the experience from, okay, she was hurt. I think it's important to note from the club perspective that for every one parent that actually asks for that refund, there's 10 others that didn't.
Totally.
And then they walked away with a bad experience. So it's
Right.
really important that these
Yeah.
policies and these systems are in place to help support the organization from a growth perspective and a culture perspective.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I mean, I wanted to bring you in. You just said two things as I was going to bring you in the conversation, which is one, this is a system, right? These things
Right.
all interrelate. If you make the right kind of decisions and set this up and collect the right information, and then you put yourself in the right perspective with the right insurance, then when you set your registration fees that are allowing you to cover those costs, if you have the right protection, then you don't have the loss that allows you to make those investments to ensure the kind of safety that allows you to keep your premiums low and allows you to keep kids safe. But when any of those things go wrong, and all of a sudden you don't have those protections and your premiums go up, or you have the revenue leakage because of registration, then all of a sudden you have less money to invest, and it's harder to absorb the ability to do things that continue to keep things safe or mitigate those kinds of losses or risks that you have. And so this is a system. And I think Jennifer, why I was excited for you to be here today is like you've been in the shoes of the people that are listening to this, right? All of us have parents and have different roles. Ken's been on the board of some organizations. But when I met you, you're working with one of the top soccer organizations in the country. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your background because you've gone from someone who's been inside the shoes and you've had different roles within organizations. And now you've devoted kind of your life and focus to this question of insurance and safety, which is not where we started when we met. So what's the lens that you come at this in your experience? And what do you think that organizations sometimes are missing or not seeing that you can relate to having been in their shoes?
So, from my perspective, I come at it from having four children that went through sports, being a manager at an organization, being a volunteer at an organization, and then actually running an organization from and every aspect. My job at the organization was really managing events, sponsorship, marketing, culture, everything tied to the business side of running that organization. And then I actually started and created insurance policies to solve a problem that didn't exist. And I think one of the disconnects in the space was really creating solutions for youth sports that were not designed previously for youth sports. So now that those policies are there, I think what clubs need to be taking into consideration is that you have to look at the actual coverages that are out there and understand that this is specific to your industry. And there's a disconnect, I feel like, from the club side and the parent side that they have been in it day to day. They're doing it, they're doing this. It's new people rotating through all the time, and they don't always understand what the parent perspective is. So it's important to understand. That's something that you said, I'd never go to an organization that doesn't have a safe culture. Well, you don't always know that until you get into it. And then once you're in it, you've committed to this. What is the culture of the organization? So it's really important, I think, for organizations to make sure that they understand that their culture and the environment that they are a part of is really the most important thing that they can communicate to the families that are paying them to have educate their children in sports.
Jennifer, I
And
appreciate that. Go ahead, Ty, please jump in.
no, I was just gonna say to that point, I think, and I don't know if it's because it's youth sports and it's revolving around kids, but this is a business.
Yeah.
And we we villainized this being a business in sports, revolving around kids. I see business as a social good when it's done right. And I think if operators saw this as a business and they would think about all of the aspects that you would running any business, like financial management and risk management in terms of insurance. Like these are all things that are the first thing you think about when you're starting your business, so to speak. And unfortunately, it's been kind of some of the last things you think about when you're starting in sports. And I think we just have to reframe how we think about the business of sports, especially when it revolves around kids. And it doesn't mean that we want to get more out of parents. It means that we have a bigger responsibility to steward really what this has become. And so it's just something that I'm seeing that has changed dramatically over the years.
It's such an important point that youth sports is a business, right? In that business, there are nonprofits that simply, it's not about generating revenue. It's about reinvesting that back into everything that they're doing. And there's some people that are going to be structured as a for-profit, right? Where they're taking that and they're taking their profit and distributing that maybe to the owners, the people running the organization. But fundamentally, it is a business, right? And thinking about that, right? There's customers. In this case, they're the parents and the families that you have to serve. They're the product of what you're delivering in your field and the safety around that. There's the financial aspects of how you're running your organization, the operational processes, how you're mitigating risk. And I think there are a lot of people that are in youth sports that don't know how to run a business, right? That's the secret, right? That's what I see. And they often sometimes don't see the business that they're in, which they're in the business of youth and community development, right? Safety is a core part of what that is. And I think the more people that embrace that and drive that excellence, I think the better off we're all going to be, right? And because if they remember why they're doing this and they remember the way that the professionalism that it takes, they'll be successful. And I think with that, and maybe Steph, I'm curious to pull you in here as we get to practical steps. Like, what can an organization do, right? If you're going to be a great business that takes this question of safety and risk and liability seriously, that allows you to do everything well in that business, right? In terms of the impact that you want to have. What are the best things that you see organizations doing? What are the tools they're using or the practices that you see that they should be considering?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to actually back up for a second because I want to just thread on what you guys just said. Half our business is for profits and sort of people you described, but half our business is municipalities, parks and rec. And we have a lot of them. It's a crazy growing thing because, by the way, whether you're trying to make $100 million as a for-profit soccer club, or you're just trying to provide the best experience you can at the local rec department, get kids off screens and on the fields, you actually have the same challenge. And I had a rec director say to me, this is maybe a year ago. She said, "Look, we view our constituents, our members of our town, as our customers, because we want those kids to have a great." And this is this is the cheapest programs you can get. We want them to have a great experience and great coaching, because if not, number one, they're going to leave the town for sport. They're going to go to the next town over or do travel or do something else. And so even though they're basically stuck with us because you live in the town and the town runs the sport, we don't take that for granted. We treat them as our customer, and we have to do our best to deliver a great experience. And we think safety is a really important part of that. And I think it's a great parallel that they're not a for-profit, right? They have a captive audience, and they don't treat them that way. And I think it's a good model. And so then to answer your question, the number one thing that is most important is to understand that all of this is a mindset. This is not a one and done. If you want to keep kids safe, you have to treat it like your career, or the way I treat my career and my growth, which is continuous improvement and continuous development. I've been a CEO for 30 years. I still want to be a better CEO, and I know I can. And every day I try and get a little bit better at it. Some days I do, some days I don't. But that's my goal. That's my vision. And so when you take safety, when you take compliance, when you take all that stuff in the same vein, which is wherever you are, that's where you are today. Don't feel bad about it, but what can you do a little bit better? Maybe I'm running the right check. Maybe I'm not. Maybe there's some trainings I could do. Maybe there's some more on-field safety. Hey, we don't actually have an AED on the field. Maybe we should go get one of those by the end of the year, right? Now, there's everything have to be tomorrow. And so the best thing you can do is, first of all, take the right mindset, which is we want to be better because it matters. And we're going to work on that over the coming months and years to keep improving, because it is a never-ending thing. And so that's the most important thing. On the super tactical level, which is maybe how you're asking some of the questions, like, you got to get background checks for everybody. Those have to comply with state law. Different states have different states. You need to do abuse prevention training. People need to know what to look for. They're not responsible for solving the crime, or even if a crime has been committed, right? They just need to be aware, see something, say something, right? And those are those are some of the most important things that we think everybody should be doing at a bare minimum, right? Because that's just really mission critical.
Todd, when you think about this, what are some things that organizations should be practically doing, or maybe overlooked a little bit, so that they're in a position to do this better and ultimately mitigate the implications of the insurance rate increases or the implications that we were describing?
Well, I think, not to repeat everything that Seth shared, but it is going to be an iterative process. And the more growth you see, your risk is changing. And so your cost is going to go up as you add more kids. That's logical. I got to spend more on equipment, all of these other things. The same thing is going to happen in insurance. Most of these organizations that we see, All right, you've gone from 500 organizations to 2,500 and you want your insurance to stay the same. Not possible. It's directly correlated. And so one of the things that we're really urging our organizations to do is every year, your broker, whoever that broker is, should be giving you some kind of assessment around policies and protocols you should have in place that are relevant to that year in your state. Really understand what that looks like. And as Seth shared, try to get 80%, 85% of the way there with the resources you have, and then build a plan to build in the other ones or find other resources. Those are one of the things that are doing. And then just be iterative. Make sure you have an incident management form that you're tracking all of those incidents. That's going to be a good leading indicator for organizations to understand what incidents are you seeing? What policy should we be focusing on next year? It's hard to know what you're up against if you don't have a baseline. So have some kind of reporting mechanism to understand what slip and falls you're seeing, behavioral issues, weather issues, whatever it is. You have an incident form. You're looking at those incidents every year. We saw these incidents happen. Here are the changes we're going to make to kind of counteract or to mitigate these incidents. And the hope is that you're getting better. But recognize that the more you grow, the more risk you have, the more expense you have, and you have to counteract that with risk management. It's a never ending process.
Yeah. I'm curious, Ken and Jennifer, anything else you would add that are like practical steps? And then we want to get to some of the Q&A here as you think about what organizations can specifically do. We talked obviously a lot about the registration insurance. So you could put that into place and maybe practically how that works, or are there policies also that they can be smarter about? Like what's the practical things that you recommend organizations do?
Jennifer, go ahead.
Over communicate. Over communicate. If you're in it in the day to day and you're doing it, you expect and think everybody else knows what's going on. And that is just not the case. Over communicate to the families why you're doing what you're doing, what guardrails you're putting, why costs are increasing. Just over communicate.
Yeah. Anything else,
Yeah.
Ken, you want to add?
It really is an amazing time that we are in youth sports, and I say that in the context of accessibility, because a big change that I've seen over the last decade is that it went from well-intentioned hero parents that are stepping up to not just be coaches but becoming board members, and then it's parents recognizing their professional skills that they can bring to an organization to the point of, hey, let's run this more like a business. Let's really step up our game. And a lot of it was, insurance. Well, Mary's got an insurance agent. Let's call them and see how we're doing. When we're supposed to be doing background checks, how do we do that? Now we have access. And Jeremy, it's not just software you're building. You're building a connective ecosystem that you're connecting the background screening, the insurance, and the ability. How do I protect my registration revenue? Well, I just turn on registration and make sure that vertical insure is enabled. Great, and I've got myself covered. So the accessibility to all these needs, it doesn't make it as scary. I just need to go out and execute on what's available. And I think it's a pretty unique opportunity we're at, where before it was much harder to protect yourself as an organization.
Yeah, and as we get to the Q&A, and some other questions have been texted to me, one thing I'm just struck by at the heart of this is so one, these challenges are real. There's only going to be more and more expectations. There's only going to be more and more risks. So you got to do this well, right? And if you don't, it could literally end your organization. And in stark terms, like I talk about the idea of an evolutionary period of youth sports, where some organizations are going to succeed in evolution and some are not. And one of the factors that will determine who's successful or not is who figures this stuff out. Because one, if you get it wrong, you're not going to be able to absorb the losses, or you're not going to have the parents that want to be in your organization and everything else. And if you get it right, those are the people that people are going to want to be with. And this summer, after the tragic thing that happened at Camp Mystic in Texas, my daughter was at a summer camp and there was a tsunami alert that happened. She was in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll never forget staying up all night and having this camp that was sending emails out every 30 minutes that they said that they would give an update about what was happening. And I was powerless as a parent. But the fact that they communicated, right? One, there's insurance, they had policies, procedures, and everything else. But the fact that they communicated proactively changed my relationship with that organization forever, and how I talk about it, who I recommend,
Literally.
what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both the downside risk protection, but also the fact that they make this a priority makes a huge difference. We got a couple questions that are asking, and know there's some others that contexted me. So there's a Lindsay's Law in Ohio around video training being sufficient for insurance purposes. So I'm sure if anyone else has that specific answer, and if not, we'll make sure Nicole will get that response. But this idea of like training and what counts as training and whether video training, anything else. I don't know if Ty or Seth, you have a perspective on that.
We probably both do. Ty, you go first.
No, I was going to say it's going to be state by state. I can share, we've done a 50 state analysis of all of the required state training and background screening that every organization needs to get to. I can share that link. But yeah, in the state of Ohio, Lindsay's Law is required for cardiac arrest. And that's something that, depending on the state, it's going to be a little bit different. But that we would consider that as training. You got your background checks. I mean, you have your concussion training, which is required by all 50 states. You have your safe sport training, and Lindsay's Law in the state of Ohio. Those are the three trainings that we offer to most of our Ohio organizations.
But video training, online video training would
Oh
be
yes,
sufficient.
definitely. Yeah, that's the mechanism we use to distribute.
Yeah,
Great.
I think the important thing to distinguish here is between training and certification. You can do, and because just like Ty, we offer all that stuff in our platform. It's only in Ohio. It's actually really frustrating. We went to the state of Ohio and said, this is a YouTube video. We will put it into our system and credential people and give them a certificate, and we will do it for free. And they said, no, thanks. And we said, oh,
right.
But anyway, there's a difference between training and certification. You can do CPR training online. You cannot get certified without hands on a dummy, right? You're not certified. You won't get a card, but you can be trained. And so there's a little bit of nuance here. And I think to the question here, if it's an insurance thing, you have to be very clear. What are they asking you? Are they saying you have to be, CPR certified? Are they saying you have to be heat stroke? Or you just need training in how to mitigate and manage it and what to do when there's an incident? And you have to be very specific in the language and the question you ask.
One thing Ty said, one question I also wonder on this is just there's this idea of like what qualifies as training that would satisfy the expectations of insurance. And then there's a question of like what actually works to keep kids safe in a situation of a cardiac incident. How do people make decisions to actually understand what's actually effective, right? Leaving aside the obligations they have that might check the box of what they need to satisfy. What is your experience of understanding like what actually makes it different to drive the behavior change or to actually create the conditions where your coaches, your families, your kids, are able to respond in those situations?
I think the training in itself or the certification process is needed. I think it's the follow-up that is happening. So yes, all of my coaches are trained on safe sport, but what are the proactive and consistent communications that I have throughout the season that this is a priority? So it's not just done in the beginning of the season and then we never hear about it the rest of the season. So real behavioral change beyond the certification in the beginning of the season is happening weekly. Maybe there are weekly or bi-weekly communications that we're sending out to our coaches to look out for these things, that we're also incorporating our parent that this is happening and that we're sending out weekly or bi-weekly communications to all of our constituents to help them understand that this is something that we take as a priority. Here's everyone's trained and here's how we're going to live it out, basically. I think, the behavioral change has to happen beyond just the training. It is great for them to know, but for them to live it is going to happen into the processes and the system you have that they walk into.
Yeah. One last question, Ty. I think there's another question coming in about it seems like it's what's connected, I assume, to from insurance perspective. What drives or influence the premium? Is it players? Is it number of players for hours on the field? Is it revenue by program? Like, what are the factors that ultimately drive that?
So the number of players, the age, the sport are gonna and the length of the policy. And so I'll give an example. Their annual policies for, say, a tackle football program. We're going to want to know the number of athletes. We're going to know that it's tackle football. We're going to know the age of those athletes at a certain level because the cost goes up. And then if it's an event, then it's going to be a kind of separate it's a week or 2-day event, or is it longer for the entire year? And then what also drives that is the limits that you want. So there's certain limits depending on what size of your organization. You can have $1 million, $2 million, $3 million limit per occurrence. An occurrence means this incident happened, it was an occurrence. And then the aggregate is it's for the entire policy period. And so those are going to be some of the drivers that are going to shift that kind of the policy price.
Great. So I'm gonna last kind of wrap up kind of perspective. One is I know we're committed to continue this conversation, so if we can put on the slide. This is just the start of with League Apps and through our Next Step platform and in partnership these great organizations. This is a dialogue we want to continue. So both explaining specifically from a technology perspective the kinds of things that we're trying to do to enable that. And as an upcoming webinar that we're going to host that really explains from a configuration, if you're a League Apps user or interested, that can help organizations really capitalize on that. And then we're going to continue the conversation. We've got two next up events that we're doing this year. The first is going to be May 11th and May 12th in Dallas. Excited for folks here in this conversation to continue the conversation there in person, really go even deeper because we want more and more people around the country to understand that. So we'll be doing two next steps this year, one in Dallas, May 11th, May 12th. Also put a high plug that will be at Dude Perfect's offices for a happy hour. That's going to be amazing, as well as we'll do next up in New York, which is October 13th and 14th and 15th in New York City. So, and lots of stuff we want to do online as well to talk about concussions, to talk about physical safety, to talk about mental safety, to talk about other practical things that you can do to continue the conversation. And so I'm going to ask a getaway conversation for this group because, I got a couple of texts of like, okay, I want to be able to represent what I heard here. Because one of the things is if the other organization around the corner is not doing a good job, that's going to increase their risk, right? As well as trying to convince their board members or their colleagues or others to say, hey, we got to focus on this. So if you had a piece of advice, each one of you, of what you would say to an organization leader to help really crystallize why this is so important, why they should pay attention right now, and what message they can carry to their peers and other organizations, what would that message be? So I'll put you on the spot first, Seth. What's the message, the sentence or two that you would tell every organization to take away here that they can communicate to others, particularly around navigating risk?
Yeah, I'd say two quick things on it. One is keep your own counsel. You're saying, well, we lose players or we lose people down the street to the other thing because they don't have coaches go there because they don't have to do as much stuff. It's not as safe. Keep your own moral principle. That's sort of, I think, one of the most important things. And I guess the other piece of it is just related to that. Do you sleep well at night? Like I sleep well at night knowing we've done all the right stuff and that stuff will still happen. And if you're not sleeping well at night because you're stressed about this, to me, that's the universe, that's your body, that's the signal that like you need help. Call us, call Ty. There's a lot of resources out there. We're happy to point anybody in the right direction, whether they use us or not. We just want to be able to keep kids safe. And so if you're not sleeping, that's to me like, hey.
Ken and Jennifer, what would you say? What's the takeaway that you think people should have around the navigating risk? What they should be, which should be translating here?
I would say focus on the culture, making sure that the culture that you are creating for your players and your athletes and their families is what you want it to be, and focus on that.
Yeah,
Ken?
There's a lot offered here. There's a lot of different things, and depending on where you're at, just pick something and focus and do it well and get it done, and then move to the next one. And don't try to bite off. There's some easy things, vertical insure enabled might be the easiest thing. Just have it on, but there are more complicated aspects, for insurance or background screening. But just focus, check the box, and move forward, and you're going to start seeing success like anything. Instead of trying to do everything halfway, just do it well and put the things in place. It's such important infrastructure, and your organization is going to be protected.
Ty, what's the message people should carry forward?
Read your mission statement and live it. I read so many youth sports mission statements. If you're really living your mission statement, this is a priority.
Yeah, I love that. And, my takeaways here is one, navigating risk means making sure that you're aware of all the things that you need to be considered and doing those things right. But that's the baseline, right? The opportunity to create that culture, to live your mission, to sleep well at night, right? Is it comes from really setting the expectation and making youth sports a better and safer experience. And then, as you said, Ken, start somewhere. The other takeaway I have is we have extraordinary leaders in youth sports. So I just want to acknowledge Seth and Ty and Ken and Jennifer. I know we're honored to have such great collaborations with your organizations. I have a lot of respect for you personally. Excited to continue the conversation on stages all across this country. And thank everyone else for joining to make youth sports a safer and better experience for all. Thanks, everyone.